AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of a variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/automate. That's oracle.com/automate. oracle.com/automate.
Good afternoon. We are doing it live right here. We get right down to business at 4 o'clock, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KABC News Blitz. Mottek On Money, live on the air for you here in 790 KABC, streaming live online worldwide at KABC.com and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, KABC.com, Apple, iTunes, YouTube, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. Stocks ending the week at record highs. The Dow up another 37 points, good enough for a record high close to close out a winning week. We're at 43,276. The S&P 500 up 23. Bingo, a new record high for the S&P 500 at 5,865. The NASDAQ also moving higher today, up 116 points, just below its all-time high at 14,489. The price of gold also hitting record highs today. We see the price of oil, meanwhile, pulling back below $70 a barrel. We'll be talking more about oil and what's happening in the Middle East, as well as what's happening here in California, impacting gas and oil prices. We did see crude oil futures finishing with a loss today, a day after posting a gain for the first time in 5 days, with the price of crude in New York below $70 a barrel. And oil has just seen its worst weekly performance in about a year. And looks like we're watching very closely what's happening here in California with Phillips 66 announcing it's closing a major refinery here in Southern California. This after Governor Newsom signed a bill into law that sets up new government rules on fuel supplies and maintenance for oil companies. I'll talk about all of this later this hour with oil industry analyst John Kilduff, analyst at Again Capital and CNBC contributor. He'll be joining us live later this hour. Well, we did see Bitcoin also make a higher run today. Right now, above 68,000, down about 400 now, but still above 68K at 68,230. Ethereum is above 2,600, and Doge has made a big move on the upside, up 14 cents. Netflix, on its earnings news, up 11% today. Now, this is interesting. Investing.com reports markets are beginning to price in the so-called Trump trade, with betting odds increasingly favoring a Republican sweep in the upcoming elections. J.P. Morgan strategists making that assessment. That's the biggest bank in the United States. Specifically, the probability of President Trump's reelection has risen to 56%, according to betting markets, while the likelihood of Republican-controlled Senate has surpassed 80%, with expectations of 3 seats changing hands. At the same time, the odds of a Democratic majority in the House have decreased from over 60% to around 55%. The rising probability of a Republican sweep has also been reflected in recent market movements over the past 2 weeks, including stronger equities, particularly in the banking sector, a strengthening dollar, tighter credit spreads, and higher yields on U.S. Treasury securities. According to J.P. Morgan, we do not believe that the probability of a Republican sweep embedded in markets at the moment is as high as the around 45% currently implied by betting odds. The strategists argue that if the Trump trade is considered similarly to its manifestation in 2016, characterized by higher Treasury yields, a stronger dollar, U.S. equities outperforming international markets, banking sector outperformance, and tighter credit spreads, the recent market shifts have been modest. They note, although current asset performances suggest a significantly higher probability of a Trump victory compared to 2 weeks ago, markets are still a long way from fully pricing the 2016 experience, according to J.P. Morgan strategist note. Continuing their note, in other words, while markets have now begun pricing in a more significant probability of a Republican sweep, we believe that there are still some ways from pricing the around 45% probability implied by betting odds, let alone from fully pricing in a Republican sweep, according to J.P. Morgan analyst. Well, joining us live now on Your Markets, your money, the economy, the whole works now. With us now, the one and only Ben Stein. Yep, financial and political commentator, economist, author of numerous books, game show host too, host of Win Ben Stein's Money. Also famous on the big screen in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He basically played himself, giving that lecture on trade policy in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ben Stein, thank you very much for coming to the line this afternoon.
My pleasure, sir, of course, as always.
Thank you. Well, it's been a while since we've chatted behind live microphones for our Frank and Stein conversation, but give us your reaction to what I just read here with the J.P. Morgan analyst pricing in a possible Republican sweep and a Trump victory at this point.
Well, it's interesting. A very smart friend of mine named Judah Friedman, who follows the betting line in Las Vegas quite closely, says that the betting line, that is to say the line of people who are professionals at making bets and placing bets, are now saying 7 to 5 odds that Trump will win, and it was just about a month ago. It was exactly the opposite. 7 to 5 that Miss Harris would win, and something has happened quite dramatic. Is it her poor performance in her speaking and possibly in her debating? Was it the fact that the ordinary citizen, or whatever that might mean, is beginning to sense that the media is so biased against the Republicans and against the conservatives that we're not getting a clear picture of what either of these people is like? Is it because there's a very high degree of tensions in Europe and in the Middle East, and Americans have a favorable vision of Trump as a person who can handle international conflict? I'm not sure, but we do know that Mrs. Harris did not do herself any favors in her recent performances on the big screen, I should say the little screen. People just are wondering what she's doing. I mean, she seems like a fine human being, and I'm sure she has many wonderful friends, and she has a lot of very rich friends because she's raised an almost unimaginable amount of money, but she is not. She has no credentials. What is a woman whose credentials in international affairs are pretty close to zero? What is she doing guiding the destinies of the world in a nuclear armed world?
On there live with the one and only Ben Stein. Dramatic developments in the Middle East. In fact, we'll be talking more about that later this hour. The killing of the Hamas leader, as well as military action in the Middle East and ongoing threats by Iran after that missile attack on Israel. And now, of course, Israel still contemplating a significant retaliation against Iran. That's obviously very top of mind as we head into this weekend. Ben Stein, give us your assessment of what's happening there.
It's very frightening. The Soviet, that's funny, I just about call it the Soviet Union. It really is still basically the Soviet Union, has done some very, very dangerous things in Europe and also in the Middle East. They, along with the collusion of the North Koreans, are genuinely evil people, and the Iranians and the Houthis, whatever the heck they are sending very, very large amounts of deadly missiles at Russia. I beg your pardon, at Eretz Israel, as we Jews call it. And there seems to be some idea that Mrs. Harris is not up to standing up to these people, these wicked people. And Mr. Trump is. Mr. Trump says he will not allow this kind of thing to happen in his world. And I think there are a lot of voters who believe that Mrs. Harris may be a fine human being, but in a world of very evil people in Russia and North Korea and Iran and Houthis and Yemen and very, very, very evil people in Lebanon in the person of Hamas, we need somebody tough. We need a tough guy. We don't need a nice, friendly, sweet girl or woman. We need a tough guy, and Mr. Trump is a tough guy. I think he's tough enough to handle these things, and maybe Mrs. Harris isn't. Maybe she's got many fine qualities. I'm sure she does, but this is a dangerous world. This is the most dangerous world I have seen, certainly in the last 30 or 40 years, and maybe ever in my lifetime. we have a world where there are a lot of countries with nuclear weapons, and they seem to be ready to use them. Who's going to stand up to them?
On the air live with Ben Stein for our Frank and Stein conversation here. And Ben Stein, looks like gold at record highs here. Did you ever think you'd see gold above $2,700 an ounce? And many analysts think it's going higher. We're at 2,736 here, and people are very nervous, as you properly point out, with what's happening around the world and also the strength of currencies and so forth. What about this big move just at a time we're told inflation is easing, gold hitting record highs above $2,700 an ounce?
It's an astonishing thing. I've always followed the wisdom of my friend and yours, Mr. Buffett, who said the amount of the amount of pricing into gold just makes no sense. We have no gold produces basically no income, except for capital gains, of course, and produces a lot of uncertainty. Why do we want it so much? I mean, what does it do for us? Except it gives us a feeling that, like people in medieval times or sometime long ago, we're safer having a basement full of gold. But are we? I mean, if there's going to be nuclear war, I'm not sure that any of us is going to be any safer with vats or, what shall I say, a chest of bullion in our basements. I don't know why gold is going up like this, and I don't know why the cryptos are going up like this. And frankly, I think the cryptos are very questionable as real investment vehicles to start with. I mean, Mr. Buffett has made himself an extremely rich man by producing goods, buying companies that produce goods and services. The main service being railroads and transportation and insurance. What does gold produce? What is its value? It's just it seems to me it's a kind of superstition, although an extremely powerful superstition. And should we be giving it the kind of respect we're giving it? I don't see why. I love it, and I have some, but to think that it should be the centerpiece of a man or woman's portfolio, I respectfully question that. I'd like to see companies that actually produce steel or make railroads or make airplanes. I'd like to see those companies go up, and I'd especially like to see the ones that are involved in defense production. I mean, we have a lot of work to catch up with our adversaries in defense production. We have to do a lot to catch up with the Chinese, with the Russians, with North Koreans. This is a difficult world, Frank. I do not see this as a post-war world. I see it as a pre-war world, and I'm scared to death about it. I'd like to see us learn the lessons that America learned after Pearl Harbor. That is better to be prepared before to play catch-up.
On the air live with Ben Stein. Thank you for sharing that wisdom with us here, and certainly what you say pulls weight, given your vast experience in the world of finance and politics, and the list goes on. Now, certainly gold has been a store of value historically, and a hedge against inflation, and we're seeing central banks around the world increase their gold holdings. So we're watching that, and of course nowadays digital gold. And we talked to the biggest fans of crypto here, as well as the harshest critics. Your mentor, Warren Buffett, has called Bitcoin and other cryptos like rat poison. So he's certainly been a harsh critic. Have you warmed up to crypto at all? And what are your thoughts about the crypto?
Yeah, it's interesting, Frank. I have a number of friends who are great fans of crypto and have been great fans of crypto for a number of years. And I ask them to explain to me, what does crypto do? What is it and what does it do? And they never can explain it to me. And to my humble way of thinking, if they can't tell me what it is and what it does, I'm a little leery of having it. I mean, if it makes them happy, God bless them. But what is it? What does it do? I don't know, and I'm not sure that anyone knows.
Well, the stock market, certainly you know a lot about that. You've written books about it, and we've had conversations over decades about all of your great books, Ben Stein. And certainly we've discussed how the market is a forward-looking mechanism based on what I mentioned earlier. What do you think the market is seeing here? Have we escaped a recession, which we were expecting all of last year? It never came. This year, it looks like we've at least escaped an official recession, but now the R word has reemerged heading into the new year. What do you see ahead for this economy?
I don't see a recession. This economy is very, very strong. I mean, I can be wrong. Predicting the future is very, very hard with economics, and especially with interest rates. But I don't see anything wrong in the economic picture. We have an astonishing labor shortage, a labor shortage that we have not seen in this country in peacetime ever. So that tells me that demand is still very, very strong, getting stronger all the time. There may be one or two hiccups along the way in terms of how many new jobs are created. But in general, we are seeing a labor market that is astonishingly strong, and we don't see those when recessions are coming. We see when recessions are coming, we see a slowdown in demand for workers. We're not seeing that. We're seeing a very, very substantial growth in demand for workers.
All right, we're going to talk more about oil later this hour, and a lot of nervous time here in California with the governor signing this new bill into law that has the state government mandating what refineries should do here in California. And Phillips 66 just announced they're going to be closing their major refinery here in Southern California in response to this latest move by the state. I know you pay close attention to those gas prices at the gas station of the Stars in Beverly Hills when you tank up there, Ben Stein. What do you see ahead for gas and oil prices and inflation for that matter?
Well, inflation, again, very hard to predict, but rarely do we see a slackening of inflation in any meaningful sense if there's a super strong labor market. And we not only see a super strong labor market, but we see a super strong labor market at greatly inflated beginning wages. I mean, the idea of beginning wages being as high as they are now would have been unthinkable even 5 years ago. And yet here we see them. And even so, restaurants, any kind of store that entity that requires manual labor is having a very hard time getting workers of any kind whatsoever. This is not the picture we see when a recession is coming. When a recession is coming, we see people having a very hard time getting jobs. We're absolutely not seeing that. I mean, I keep saying this, and I'll say it again and again and again. I am old. I'm probably one of the oldest people you have on the show on a regular basis. I can remember even in the 50s, which were a very prosperous time, it took a lot of work to get a job. And when you did get a job, it did not pay by any means a lavish wage, and it doesn't pay a lavish wage now. But jobs are going begging. People are just dying to work. Employers are just dying to get workers. And that's not the sign of an economy in trouble. Companies are selling stock, and new issues are coming out, even from very well-established companies like giant super companies like Boeing. What's going on here? These are signs of a prosperous economy, not an economy in trouble. And I must say, if I were Mrs. Harris, I would try to make the point that you may hate me and you may think I'm unqualified, and maybe I am. I personally think she is, but I have presided over an economy that's been very, very, very strong. I don't know what you're complaining about when people say the issue is the economy is stupid. Well, the economy's damn good. I wouldn't vote for her on a bet because she thinks she knows so little about foreign policy. But I really cannot fault her for the situation of the economy. It's just not bad.
But there's no old on this program. It's young or young at heart, and you certainly fall into those categories here, Ben Stein. And it's time to break out the champagne in all of this with the stock market ending the week at record highs. Let's not forget about how we started here. The Dow and the S&P 500 end the week at record highs. And maybe you'll be watching your favorite movie again this weekend. Is that possible? Where you probably can recite word for word your favorite movie.
Of course, I cannot get a week in my life where there's no Ferris Bueller. I mean, And I intend, by the way, to spend much more time trying to teach my fellow Americans about what economics is all about. And I think they need to know. I think they need to know that the fact that the media says the economy is not strong doesn't mean a thing. The economy is damn strong. I mean, their children, no matter how slothful and incompetent and lazy they are getting jobs with no problems at all. Let's see more of confidence. Let's see some more cheer, good nature about the economy. There's a lot good going on about the economy. Again, big weak spot in the Democrat Party. They have no idea of how to handle international affairs or defense matters, and that's a big subject. But this economy is not weak.
And by the way, it should be noted, business is not boring, despite the scene there, one of those famous scenes in American cinema, which you basically improvised that whole scene as an economic professor yourself, right? And even though you put the class to sleep, I think business is darn interesting, don't you?
I find business incredibly interesting. After all, what's more interesting than money? I mean, money can buy so many incredibly wonderful things, including love, that I find, I mean, they say money can't buy me love. Really? I haven't noticed that. And there's an awful lot of people saying that they don't have any money, they can't have love. But I don't see people who have money having a hard time finding love.
Well, we love the Beatles, and we love you, Ben Stein. That we should dedicate a whole show to that, perhaps. Ben, thank you very much for taking the call here. It's always great to have you with us for our Frank and Stein conversation live here on Mottek on Money on 790 KBC. 790 KBC welcomes Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons, coming to the Long Beach Terrace Theater on November 22nd. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you are caller number 9. Call right now, 1-888-795-2222. Tickets furnished by Nederlander Concerts. Winning day for the stock market. Mottek on Money continues here in 790 KBC. We have a winning day for both the Dow and the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, with both the Dow and S&P 500 wrapping up the week at, you guessed it, record highs. The Dow 37 points at 43,276. The S&P 500 of 23 at 5,865. NASDAQ at 116 at 14,489, just below its all-time high. The yield in the 10-year note now at 4.08%. Bitcoin hovering above 68K, Ethereum at 2,600, and Doge at the moment at 14 cents. Now the latest news here in 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Stocks closing out the week at record highs. Another reason to cheer: oil has come down this past week. Could lower gas prices be ahead despite all the concerns about what's happening in the Middle East? Crude oil futures finishing with a loss today, a day after posting a gain for the first time in 5 trading sessions, with the price of oil ending below $70 a barrel today and seeing its biggest loss for the week in about a year. Looking forward now, of course, the Middle East very much in focus, with Iran and Israel still locking horns. Israel still under threat by Iran and vice versa. The election, of course, coming up here in the U.S., implications on Ukraine, Russia, and the situation in China, which apparently is affecting oil markets in a big way. Let's talk about all of this now with oil industry analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital, also CNBC contributor, longtime contributor to this program. John, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank. Great to be with you.
Likewise, and we have a situation here in California with the Phillips 66, the oil giant with a refiner here in Los Angeles, announcing that they're going to be closing that refinery by the end of next year. This after Governor Newsom signed a bill into law that sets up new state government rules on fuel supply and maintenance for oil refineries. What's your reaction to that big news here, first of all?
I just can't believe that what a self-inflicted wound this is going to end up being. I mean, Frank, over the years when you and I have spoken, we've had sort of, you get that run of bad luck where you get 1 or 2 or even 3 of your refineries out there having problems at the same time and your prices go through the roof at the pump. This is going to be a persistent now problem. There was already no room for error. How they're going to supply, I mean, the industry is remarkable on how it can sort of make do. But you're going to be talking about basically being reliant on importation now of fuel from the Pacific from out in Asia now, and from your northern state neighbors in Oregon and Washington. But look, you're adding transportation costs. There's other risks. These gallons will be these highly combustible gallons will be traveling in great distances to get to your local gas station. I'm just in shock, and it's going to be awful. And this is one I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't get repealed or rolled back in some way, because that's the impact that's looming for California drivers.
So this, as the global price of oil moves down, we're doing things here in California that will likely increase the price once again. And there have been all kinds of predictions here as to how high gas prices will go in California as a result of all of this, which already is the most heavily regulated state as far as the oil business is concerned. What's your prediction on where gas and oil prices go from here?
Frank, it's going to be like you'll never get a break now. Those prices will go high, go higher, and stay high. That's what I'm fearful of. I mean, at least, in the rest of the country here, when we have these bad times in the Middle East or other things happen, you get a price spike. The whole cycle that we've just gone through. I can tell you, I just paid about $2.70 a gallon here in the New Jersey area for gasoline. So that eat your heart out, California, and it's
full
not
service
funny.
too, right? In New Jersey, they're all full service stations.
Full service. Right? The gentleman, if you're nice to him, will even check your oil and stuff for you. But or do the windshield. Yeah, it's like the old times. It's really a beautiful thing. But this is going to be a heavy burden on the working class. And look, Frank, one of the several things that have come out of the pandemic and the inflation problem we had to endure, big component of that was high energy prices. Oil prices going over $100 a barrel because of the Ukraine-Russia war. And we saw what it did to the economy. We saw how it stoked inflation. And, you saw the burden that it is on working class people. We always talked about higher gasoline prices are like a tax, and it's a tax that is regressive as hell. And it hits the working class folks the most, because all the other problem you have, especially in California, you're such a car-reliant state. Mass transit is just not really an option. So you have zero ability to avoid paying these ever higher prices. I really can't believe this went through. Governor Newsom has already, I'm not one for the politics, but Governor Newsom has already chased out Chevron. This Phillips 66 refinery is a big loss. There will be more refinery closures as well as a result of this. And you already have this gasoline standard, the CARB gasoline, California Air Resources Board gasoline, that we can't ship to you from any other state, basically. I've always talked in the past, when you've had your problems about California being an island unto itself, they're putting up a great wall of California here in terms of available supplies from other states, regions, and even the world for that matter.
Isn't that something? We're on the air live with oil industry analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital. You see him on CNBC all the time, and I've heard him on this program for years. And as you have noted, yes, California is an island unto itself for the oil business, and we're paying more here than in Hawaii, which is an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So that should tell you something right there. Shifting now to the Middle East, which you're following developments there very, very closely. Still a very nervous time given the major developments this week. What's the expectation here on how this might affect the price of oil? These major developments, the death of the Hamas leader this week, and is a peace deal more likely following what's happened there? And what do you see ahead in reaction in the financial markets?
I mean, I will say President Biden certainly gave the hopeful analysis of what can happen. Although I think on this one, he might not be too far off the mark. I mean, Hamas has now been decimated. It's almost like here in New York when there's a new head of the mafia, and it doesn't take long for the FBI and the U.S. attorney to come get him. So this seems like that's what's going on there. Look, and Frank, this is another major, killing by Israel that goes unresponded by Hamas, Hezbollah, and notably for me, Iran. And you and I were talking about this recently. I don't think Iran has the stomach for any kind of direct confrontation with Israel. I also don't think they have the prowess or the military might to be able to take on Israel. It'll be their worst nightmare if they do. So that's why I do think that this is an opportunity here, finally, for a diplomatic off-ramp. Hamas has made just a killing field of Gaza. It's in ruin. If you look at any of the photography that comes out of the region, and clearly, the rest of the countries that are key to this, like Saudi Arabia and others, do not want a region-wide war. Another thing you and I talked about recently that came to fruition last week was that word that China has been in contact with their Iranian counterparties and others, and the Israelis for that matter, to not bomb Iran's oil infrastructure because China has the most to lose if that Strait of Hormuz gets blocked. We'll all pay a price to a degree, but it's China who has the most to lose, and they are finally making that known to their allies in the region, where they have many.
John, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon, and we'll follow developments closely here with you this weekend. John Kilduff, oil industry analyst at the Again Capital, CNBC contributor and longtime contributor to this program. John, thank you very much, and hope to speak with you again very soon.
My pleasure, Frank. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and right out to the freeways now on 790 KBC. It's Frank Mottek here. Did you know that for more than 10,000 years, gold has been the greatest store of value and considered a safe haven asset to preserve your wealth? Now with the U.S. debt at more than $35 trillion and climbing, not to mention the Biden administration getting us involved in costly wars, developing the digital dollar, central bank digital currency, and inflation spiraling, it's more critical now than ever before to safeguard your assets, like your cash savings and retirement accounts, with physical gold. Opening a gold IRA is one of the best ways to secure your wealth and create a stable financial future. Stop worrying about your retirement in the market and cash savings in the bank. Feel confident, prepared, and in control with physical gold and silver. Give Joe Morgan a call now at 1-800-753-8534. Mention Frank Mottek, and you could get $1,000 worth of silver with a qualifying purchase. Call now 1-800-753-8534 or visit UnitedGoldGroup.com. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Watching what's happening in the Middle East this weekend, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the killing of Hamas leader this week had settled the score with him, but stressed that the task before Israel is not complete. Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel's focus was on securing the return of the roughly 100 hostages still in Gaza taken during the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th of last year. President Biden said the death of the Hamas leader, after almost 2 decades of Hamas rule in Gaza, was good news for Israel, for the U.S., and for the world. Back in March, Vice President Harris warned Israel not to enter Rafah, the southern Gaza enclave where Hamas is holed up among the civilian population. This week, she praised Israel's success in killing Hamas leader as he hid out in that very city. Joining us live now with analysis of all this is Jake Novak, longtime Middle East analyst, as well as a CNBC contributor and author. Jake Novak, thank you very much for coming to the line this afternoon, and give us your reaction to these epic developments this week.
Well, it's been a great week. Obviously, this is very, very good news. I mean, I know that there were other major terrorist leaders taken out in the last several weeks, and maybe people are getting a little bit confused, but this was target number one. This was the person who masterminded the October 7th massacres. This is the person who's been leading Hamas on the ground. There's a lot of leaders who are in other countries living a life of luxury. This is the guy who's been leading their forces on the ground, their killing operation on the ground for a very long time. So very, very, very good news. And yet another killing for the Israeli army that does not involve any collateral damage. Ever since June 27th, when Joe Biden's cognitive problems became obvious to the rest of the world, the Israelis became more emboldened in targeting individual leaders, which is something the U.S. pushed back on them. And without a real president to bang the gavel against them on that, they've been very, very active in going after individuals. And you may have noticed the civilian casualty numbers have fallen through the basement, because when you target these individual leaders like they should have done in the first place, you don't have a lot of people in the way. So it's been a great week. And there's been some signs that Hamas, some members of Hamas are ready to surrender. There was one northern Gaza town which literally raised a white flag today. So hopefully that will be something that happens more over the rest of this weekend.
And we heard from former President Trump that he said President Biden should allow Israel a free hand in its operations against Hamas following the takeout of the Hamas leader this week. Also, we're hearing from former President Trump that perhaps a deal now to end this conflict might become easier now that the head has been decapitated. What do you think about all that?
Oh, absolutely true. I've been very upset with the lack of any real diplomacy in the world. We just don't have diplomats in the world. There's no Henry Kissinger. And listen, those people were problematic, some of these major diplomats of the 70s and the 80s. But for the most part, they made some effective deals. And there's been nobody on the stage. Okay, now, what's the excuse now? Now that the Hamas leader has been killed, this is an easy layup for someone who wants to make a name for him or herself as a diplomat. Go in there. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has given a very generous offer to the remaining members of Hamas. He says, if you give back the hostages and lay down your arms, we will not kill you and we will not capture you. Now, that's the sweetheart of a deal. Now we need someone, a major diplomat, preferably from the United States, to really pressure and broker this deal, either with Qatar or even with the Iranians. Where are they? Because this is the opportunity now for us to kind of finish this quickly. And I think the Israelis will finish it quickly with or without a diplomatic deal. But this is a point now where anyone who supports Israel doesn't have to feel bad when the diplomats come in, because usually that means Israel's going to have to give up something that they don't want to give up. But right now, they are in a really good position, and this would be a wonderful time for diplomacy. And so far, I haven't seen it. It's amazing to me. We just don't even have anyone who seems to want to be a major peacemaker in the world right now. It's a shame.
And the Biden administration, as has been noted, a number of reports now for quite some time, accused of trying to hold back Netanyahu following the October 7th terror attacks. And even Vice President Harris warned Israel not to invade Rafah, where the Hamas leader ended up getting killed this week.
Yeah, she has a tremendous amount of nerve to come out with a statement yesterday celebrating this, because if the Israelis had listened to her and listened to Joe Biden, this terrorist would still be protected. And, it's been such a hard question to answer in America for the last 6 or 7 months. Why is this administration so interested in preserving Hamas? Now, granted, they don't want to keep them strong, but there's some reason this administration wants to keep them alive and kicking in some way. Now, I know a lot of people have said, it's to get the votes in Michigan and Minnesota where there's a large Arab American population. But I think that is a misdirection. I don't think that's true, because this was the same policy of the Obama folks who also worked for Biden and Harris in the years when Michigan and Minnesota weren't in play. Obama never had a problem winning those two states. He didn't have to care about that. So it's something else. And what I think it is a combination of people in this administration, again, holdovers from the Obama team, who ideologically have this misbegotten notion that a balance between Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel will bring peace in the region. It's the exact opposite. Iran's only goal is war. There's no need to prop them up. There's no reason to prop them up. And sadly, I also think there are some people who are absolutely agents of Iran in our State Department and in this White House. There's a lot of cash flow coming in and out of Iran, and we've transferred tens and hundreds of billions of dollars over there. In the history of the world, you know this better than I do. In the history of the world, you don't transfer that kind of money from point A to point B without the people facilitating the transfer getting a cut of the money. I don't have any names. It's not a conspiracy theory, but it's just pure logic. That kind of money doesn't transfer from point A to point A without someone getting a cut of it. And I think that explains some of this crazy policy. That's the only real explanation.
In the meantime, Israel's still contemplating a response to Iran's missile attack on Israel recently. So another nervous weekend here. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think they already have retaliated in ways that are unconventional and we don't know about, although we do know some of it. Now, as we speak, the head of the IRGC, that's Iran's terrorist army, the head of their foreign proxy terror army, their terror army that goes all over the world, he remains in a torture chamber in Tehran, based on the fact that whether it was Israeli intelligence or somebody else within the infrastructure in Tehran, has convinced the Ayatollahs that the head of the IRGC is the one who gave up the location of Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, who was killed. So there's no trust now between the Ayatollahs and the IRGC. I'm sure Sun Tzu said something along these lines, like, don't kill your enemy, get them to kill each other.
Yeah. Jake, thank you very much for taking the call on all this. I look forward to staying in touch with you. That is Middle East analyst Jake Novak, live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back with more at 4 Monday afternoon right here for you. Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
The Jim Jackson Show isn't just another NBA podcast. Of course, I'll break down everything about the league that I played in for 14 years and now cover as a broadcaster. There will be plenty of interviews with the biggest players, personalities, and insiders in the NBA. I say there's more to life than ball. That's why on this podcast, I'm going to delve into other passions, maybe business and maybe travel. I love lifestyle. The Jim Jackson Show, wherever you listen.